Good morning. I'm Michelle King. I am the Director of Program Planning and Executive Administrator at the Air Pollution Control District here in Louisville. And we're going to welcome you to the air quality portion of today's meeting. And we're gonna see if we can't start out with a little bit of an overview for you today. Let's see, there we go. I'm going to go through a little bit of information about our national ambient air quality standards. I think most of you are familiar. Let's see if I can get your faces off my screen so I can see the slide. There we go. Are familiar with these standards, or as we call them, NAAQS. Our area is currently designated in attainment with all of these standards except for ozone, which has been the subject of our conformity determinations for many years. So I know we've all had lots of discussion around ozone, especially over these last couple of years when we've begun fulfilling requirement to, again, determine conformity with our transportation plan and those mobile vehicle emissions budgets. So today, Byron Gary, APCD's regulatory coordinator, is going to provide some updates on that attainment status, including those motor vehicle emissions budgets, or MVEBs, that are set as a result of that designation. Byron's also going to provide a look at the process underway to review the fine particulate standard, which is another pollutant that's been included in our transportation conformity requirements in the relatively recent past. And from there, we're going to switch gears a little. We're going to provide an overview of some of the programs that we will be promoting as we go into ozone season, which began at the beginning of March. And that's going to include an overview of the CARE program, which I hope you are all familiar with. That's something that TTCC has provided a recommendation for funding of to both the Indiana side through the CMAQ program, and as well as the KYTC side through our STBG funds. So Dee Lynch is going to bring us a look at that. She's our CARE program coordinator, and I think a familiar face to many of you here. And lastly, I'm just going to finish us up with a little bit of information about air quality alerts that you might see through this ozone season, and then how we can find and share that information to protect our health and that of our communities. So with that, Byron, I'm going to hand this over to you.
The conformity issue that is obviously top of mind for us right now is our ozone NAAQS status. For a little background on the next slide here. Just the timeline on what's happened so far. We were designated non-attainment back in June 2018. Conformity requirements kicked in a year after the effective date of that designation, so in August of 2019. Been using an interim test since then. We also had to submit a few other preliminary requirements. The attainment deadline was last August, and because attainment is determined on the three most recent complete years of data, the determination was required to be made on 2018 through 2020 data. And next slide, that determination was required to be made by EPA on February 3rd of this year. They missed that deadline and actually just this morning put out a proposed reclassification. They determined we did not make it because in 2018 through 2020, our design value was 0.001 parts per million over the standard. So they have proposed to reclassify the Louisville metro area, Louisville, Kentucky, Indiana non-attainment area from marginal non-attainment to moderate non-attainment for the 2015 ozone standard. When finalized, this will begin the clock on a number of other requirements, including reasonably available control technology and measures, reasonable further progress, another attainment deadline, as well as eventually, if we still fail to attain by that point, kicking back into that program potentially. However, next slide, we fortunately have dipped back below the standard. As of the end of last year, we are at 0.069 parts per million, so just below that standard of 0.070. And we are working on our redesignation request along with the Division of Air Quality. That has been submitted to EPA in a pre-draft form. So EPA is taking a sort of informal look at it to raise any red flags and give us any informal comments to try and address them before we actually put that out for public comments. And that should hopefully get back to us from EPA within the next couple of weeks, and we should be going out for a formal public comment period shortly. Before that goes out, or by the time that goes out, I will send out the full redesignation request to the interagency consultation group, which met a few times. But on the next couple slides, I'll go over some of the stuff that you guys will be seeing there. Some of this, the interagency consultation group already saw. So the next slide is just emissions projections for VOCs out to our maintenance year. When we request redesignation, we have to show not only that we're in attainment now, but that we will continue to be in attainment at least 10 years out into the future. So 2035 will be our maintenance year. It was a nice round number and a year for which we already had mobile projections, so that made the emissions inventory portion easier. The next part is just the same slide, but for NOx. We are also projected to continue to decline in NOx emissions out to 2035. Everybody might have some familiarity with this already, but part of the attainment and maintenance demonstration is setting budgets for on-road emissions. On this slide, Michelle's showing those budgets, and these are based on those emissions projections, but we're allowed to allocate some of that difference between what got us to attainment in 2019 and in 2035, where we're projected to be overall from all sources. And because there is a significant decline there, we were allowed to allocate a portion of that safety margin to our motor vehicle emissions budgets. We proposed allocating a 15% margin of safety. We looked at a number of different factors in doing so. We convened the interagency consultation group, had a couple of really great meetings, got some very thoughtful comments back from Andy and Randy at KIDPA and addressed those. Ultimately, we decided to stick with the 15% allocations of the safety margin to those MVEBs, and we expect that to be in that pre-hearing formal proposal that we'll put out shortly. Next slide, I believe, is moving on to PM. So particulate matter is one that we're in attainment for now, but has been a problem for us in the past and maybe again in the future. Next slide shows a little bit about what's going on right now. The current annual average standard is set at 12 micrograms per cubic meter. That was set back in 2012. In 2020, EPA decided to retain that previous standard, finding that it was adequate to protect public health. But then in June of last year, they decided, after receiving some requests for reconsideration, to rethink whether or not that was still wise. They subsequently put out a supplement to their science assessment and policy assessment, and the Clean Air Scientific Advisory Council, or Committee rather, KSAC, just last month, reported back to EPA on the ISA and policy assessment. EPA has said that they intend to make a determination to put out a proposal on whether to retain that, or whether upon further reconsideration, they're going to change the standard sometime this summer, and they are still on track, they tell us, to put forward a final determination by spring of next year. And next slide might give some sort of quick glimpse of, oh, no, I'm sorry, before going on to the next part, just what we might end up seeing. The policy assessment from EPA, so this is EPA staff's review of the science and sort of trying to bridge that into policy and what they think should be done. The current annual standard of 12 micrograms per cubic meter could go as low as 10 micrograms, or even as low as 8 or lower than 10, depending on what weight you give to different science assessments, different effects, and different priorities policy-wise. The EPA staff did recommend retaining the 24-hour standard, which we traditionally have had less trouble attaining, and is set at 35 micrograms per cubic meter within a 24-hour period, so trying to avoid those high peaks. Next page, the KSAC, which is a chartered committee convened by EPA of outside experts, took a look at those EPA staff reports, and the majority of them actually said between 8 and 10 micrograms per cubic meter would be appropriate. A minority of the members said that somewhere between 10 and 11, but all of them thought that somewhere below 12 would be appropriate. And they actually took a look at the 24-hour standard and said that they thought a lower range might be appropriate for that. The majority of them anyway, minority thought that EPA was right to retain it. Next slide shows where we may end up being with this. So right now we are under the 12 microgram per cubic meter standard, but depending on where that is set, based on the feedback from the policy assessment and KSAC, if it is set at 10 or lower, we currently would not be in attainment for the PM standards. So we would fall back into non-attainment. So this could happen as early as the end of 2023. It's typically a little longer after that before EPA makes determinations, but it would probably at least take into account this year's monitoring data, it sounds like. So another big reason to try and keep emissions down over this coming year. And I think that's all on the NAC status, but I just wanted to give a quick plug for a program that we're working on here at the district. No, you're good. Exactly right. The Air Quality Action Partners program is something that we rolled out last year by encouraging all of our stationary sources to sign up to make commitments to meet some of these MPSG recommendations. Some of you may have participated in the MPSG, mostly on the mobile source committee, but out of the point source committee, there were several recommendations that the district should encourage action and recognize our sources for taking action to avoid or lower emissions, particularly on air quality alert days. This is sort of a summary of 3 of those point committee recommendations. And on the next slide, signups for 2022 have started now. Last year was the first year. We started with just our stationary sources, encouraging them to sign up. But we sent out an announcement this year on April 1st, encouraging folks to sign up by April 30th via that online form. And this year we are opening it up to all businesses and organizations. There are a lot of things on the form, even just from last year, that anybody could do to help improve air quality here in Louisville. A number of the things that folks here might be interested in included things pertaining to fleet and vehicle emissions, things like committing to fleet turnover, aiming at lower emissions vehicles, as well as signing up to become an idle-free business, which is something that I think Dee might mention here in just a moment. So I'll pass it on to Dee, but just leave you with that, and feel free to spread the word. Those links are in the presentation there. Glad to have pretty much anybody who wants to sign up. So more the barrier. Dee?
Yeah, so Dee Lynch is going to talk. So that ACAPS is a little bit of a outreach effort. Well, not a little bit, a big outreach effort to our businesses, but by far our largest outreach effort to change behavior is our CARE program. Long-standing, very successful. So you all are going to get a preview from Dee of the ozone season outreach from the CARE program this year. Dee, tell me when to advance.
Thank you. Go ahead and advance to my first slide. You're getting a little bit of a sneak peek. Our media campaign that will run during ozone season. A few of the parts of this campaign have rolled out, but a few things are still in production. So you're going to get an early look at those things. This is all part of CARE's ongoing year-round outreach efforts, including those idle-free tags that you see in the picture that are provided to at least 95 schools in JCPS. And I think we have like 64,000 of those tags. So this is a sneak peek at our media campaign. We are regional, receiving money through grants from both Kentucky and Indiana. And so obviously we're reaching out to 5 counties. And as Michelle mentioned, we are timing this for ozone season. So you can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so you can see that we're using a variety of media. During the pandemic, digital has been key for reaching people, and we use social media, Facebook, Instagram. The radio ad is still in production, and our video ad is also in production. You can see some concepts on this slide. The idea behind it is that it's called Care for Tomorrow. We did focus groups in 2021 to kind of help hone our message and make sure that we kind of took the temperature of consumers and young drivers. The world changed a lot in the last couple of years. So getting those findings and figuring out what kind of messages would resonate with people to reduce emissions, improve air quality, and speak to them in a language that really connects with people. Kind of the centerpiece of that will be this video ad. It's going to be animated, which is a nice kind of transition. If you've ever looked at the CARE website at healthier.org, it has kind of these colorful animated background to it. There's, little boats and bikes and things moving in it. And it's kind of a serene landscape. The video ad is going to kind of capture that feeling. It's going to start black and white, not with this picture, but something like it with a kind of a Louisville landscape. People are going to be in a car rider line near a school. You're going to see kind of the clouds of emissions, and everything's going to be kind of gray and bleak. And as people make decisions which would affect air quality in a good way, such as turning off their engines or swapping out their mower from a gas-powered mower to an electric mower, then you'll see the clouds kind of come out, move, the sun comes out, the colors come out, and it gradually changes to, a bright, beautiful landscape as seen from the sunny side over in Indiana. You see the kind of the Louisville on the other side. And it's going to kind of visually kind of show what choices people make and how they can affect the air quality. And it should roll out by the end of April. So really looking forward to that. And what I really like about the message is not only is it very visual, and it kind of gives kind of that positive drive for people to do something for air quality, but also because it's kind of has that colorful change in it, it will be more, it'll be a message that even if you had the sound off, if you didn't hear anything, you kind of get the message through the drawings. So excited about that. Also excited about getting out to table again at events. We will be sponsoring some Waterfront Wednesdays, and we've invited partners to come out. I know Every Commute Counts is excited to come out. And sustainability through Metro is already talking about coming out to kind of focus a little bit on solar. We can feature our lawn care program. So, hoping everybody stays healthy and happy, and we can have outdoor events again. So that's coming up April 27th, should be our first Waterfront Wednesday. And if you want to move to the next slide, please. Okay, this is just one example of some of the digital advertising we've done, and probably the most interesting one. I've gotten calls from around the nation about this. A few years ago, we were kind of an experiment with using Waze, one of the most popular traffic ad. It's crowdsourced. If you're trying to find your way around a city, it'll help you to steer around wrecks, get to where you're going. And it also senses when you've stopped. So if you are stopped and maybe you're sitting in that car rider line or in a drive-through, and you're in the geo-fenced area, which includes the counties that we're part of, that screen might pop up with a little count to 10, car off then. And you may say, oh, I'm too busy, I can't read this right now. There's a little save for later where you can just hit that little button, and later on the app will remind you, hey, you wanted to go find out more about saving money and not idling so much and helping the air at CARE. So, this is kind of a way of using new technology and with a popular ad, and also, getting that message right in front of people when they're actually engaged in the behavior that we're trying to change. So the other app that we use quite a lot, Phil, you can go ahead. Go ahead to social media. I could talk about this stuff for a while, so you're good to keep me on track. You see the Facebook ad. We also are on Instagram or on Twitter, and any way that we can share information about air quality. Here, the artwork you can see is actually from our website. So it all will look very familiar. And that's kind of important so that, people trust the ads. If you click on something and it takes you to something that looks very different, it's kind of jarring, there should be a smooth transition from these ads to our actual Help the Air website, where you can read about more things about air quality. And people tend to spend at least a minute looking at the website and getting info from it. And that's actually very, very good. Anything else here? Yes, schools, festivals. It's been difficult to get into schools, no doubt, because of the pandemic. Recently, though, I've been a partner with Brightside, with Metro Solid Waste, with the water company, and several other colleagues who do similar work. We partnered to do a after-school program at Rutherford Elementary, where we were doing guest presentations for a group called the Global Game Changers. And we're going to spin that off into a summer program through Evolve 502, the Backpack League, to do more summer educational programming through JCPS. And we have several things coming up on the calendar. Hope we have good weather and everything really happens the way it should. We've got Tree Fest coming up this Saturday out at Joe Creason Park. Earth Day events are happening at the zoo, and I plan to be out there on the Sunday around Earth Day. And I am getting in a couple of schools. There's a picture there from Holy Cross. Not only do they take idle-free signage for their parking lot, where the seniors and juniors like to hang out in the parking lot before school instead of going into the gym where they're supervised. But we tried to do it really safely. We met quickly in the classroom and went out, and everybody checked their tires to make sure they were all at the right pressure, and kind of giving them, young drivers, some good habits to start out with.
Thank you, Dee. The CARE program is one of those very recognizable pieces of our outreach efforts here. And so that really helps us get the word out very widely about driver behaviors in particular. But one of the other things that the CARE program helps us do is raise awareness around air quality alerts. So these are alerts that are called when the air quality index is forecast to be at a value of 100 or higher. And so earlier at the beginning of the presentation, you saw the chart with all those national ambient air quality standards. The air quality index takes those standards, those levels for 4 criteria pollutants, including ozone and particulate pollution, which are the ones that we typically are most concerned about here in the Louisville region. And it sets all those variable standards across different timeframes, all against a standard scale and color coding. So 100 AQI value corresponds with the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. So here's what you would see with the AQI. On days when the AQI is 50 or below, there's great air quality out there. No one needs to even, give it a second thought, other than to help continue protecting it so we stay good. But also when it gets to that between 50 to 100, we're still meeting the standard. It's still healthy for most people, but unusually sensitive people might want to consider, changing their activities a little bit to reduce their exposure. It isn't until we hit that 100 mark that we start exceeding those national ambient air quality standards. And that's what really is driving our attainment or non-attainment status and all of the policy making and regulatory framework that comes with that designation. But aside from all that regulatory work, there's also things that individuals can do. It's really a public health tool to get the word out about AQI. So these things can be forecast, and we try to do so. Just, much like the weather, air quality conditions are going to be based on meteorological factors. They're going to be based on the current air quality in the area, but also air quality in the areas upwind from us at any given time, which is a variable situation here in the Ohio River Valley. Some days upwind is in a different direction than in other days. And so our air monitoring staff work closely with the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, and they forecast levels of ozone and fine particulates in our region. Anytime they expect to see that above 100, an air quality alert is going to be issued. We try to do that typically 2 to 3 days out. Sometimes it might come quicker than that, and we won't have as much warning. But the idea there is that having that information in advance is really to protect health. And so that's two ways. One, individuals can reduce their exposure by changing their activities on those days. So it might be a good day to limit outdoor exercise or strenuous activities. A school may decide to have recreation inside in the gym instead of out on the playground that day. People working outside might try to limit their outdoor activities, especially when it's ozone driven later in the day when ozone levels are rising. Ozone is created in the presence of sunlight, and that happens faster with heat. So later in the day, we've had more hours of sunlight, a little hotter. That's when we get that ozone levels pretty high. So people can make some adjustments, and also can monitor their health conditions. And that's especially important for folks with asthma or COPD, or who are caregivers of those with asthma or COPD. So they can be on the watch for those symptoms, have their rescue medications at hand. But importantly, we also want to change behavior on the side of reducing emissions. So there are things that we can do as individuals and as businesses or as organizations that can reduce polluting activities on those days, and hopefully actually make a difference in whether we're exceeding that standard that day and the AQI can stay below 100. So that might be things like delaying mowing, other gas-powered landscape maintenance activities, change some habits to reduce driving. So maybe a good day to car or van pull, every commute counts. Maybe a good time to take transit. TARC's always our friend here. Maybe it's a good day to say, we're going to meet virtually instead of all getting in our cars and going to a central location. That seemed a little bit crazier a couple of years ago. Nowadays, it's just so status quo, right? But any of those kind of activities that you can delay. And I really wanted to point that out because, most of us around the table here are government officials and work in the transportation arena. And this is something that, we may be able to do with our own organizations. And it's also something that we can help get the word out through our own networks to make sure our various communities have this information. So where can we get those air quality alerts? Well, we've got a number of ways. So we've got email alerts, you've got an ACPD notification list. CARE puts this information out through their CARE network. So they've got lots of signups there. So there's some options if you want to look through email. If you're a social media follower, we've got ACPD social media feeds. We've got the CARE social media feeds. I've jokingly said we're not on TikTok yet, but if somebody comes up with the air quality alert TikTok dance, I really want to see it. We'll ask Andy to do that as a special guest on our TikTok feed. I'm sure you'll be great. And then there's also some options like EnviroFlash, which is nationwide. So if you travel a lot, that's a great tool to know about, because then you can look for air quality alerts in the area that you're traveling to. And now more than ever, meteorologists really try to get this information into the weather forecast. So just watching the local news, you will see when we call air quality alerts, the team here gets that information out to our media and they spread it out throughout the community. And even in the weather app. So you're on the Weather Channel or Weather Underground, those things. You can find air quality information everywhere. It's just a matter of understanding what that AQI means. And so this is something that, we can get information out about. It's really just a health-based tool for us and our communities to know more about. So with that, kind of come to the end here. And if we've got, any questions, we're happy to field them. There was a a lot of information.